The blade was halfway to his throat when the Vampire King spoke her true name. Sera Mallory froze, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack through her ribs. The silver dagger trembled in her grip, catching the flickering candlelight of the ancient study. She had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, memorizing the servant roots, learning the gestures of submission, perfecting the downcast eyes of a housemaid too insignificant to notice. Yet, here she stood, caught before the killing blow could land, and the vampire lounging in the leather chair before her hadn't even bothered to turn around. "Sera Mallory," he repeated, his voice like velvet dragged over gravel. "Daughter of Thomas Mallory, the hunter who died trying to kill my brother 15 years ago. You have your father's eyes. Pity you also inherited his foolishness." The words struck her harder than any physical blow. Sera's disguise, the plain gray dress and white apron of the manor's kitchen staff, suddenly felt like tissue paper. The dark wig she wore itched against her scalp. Everything she had planned, every careful step, crumbled to dust. "How?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "How did I know?" The chair swiveled with agonizing slowness. Vampire King Lazarus Corvain was everything the whispered stories claimed, and nothing like them at all. White hair fell past his shoulders in waves that seemed to catch light that didn't exist, framing a face so pale it appeared carved from marble. His eyes were the color of fresh blood, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run and stay frozen in equal measure. He wore modern clothes, a black shirt rolled to his elbows, but he sat like a king from another century, with the absolute certainty of someone who had never known defeat. "Your heartbeat," he said simply. "It pounds differently than the others. Fear and rage make a distinctive rhythm. Every servant here is content, or at least resigned. You are neither." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a particularly interesting specimen. "Also, you smell like silver polish and wolfsbane. The real maids know better than to handle our silverware with bare hands, and we certainly don't keep wolfsbane in the kitchens." Sera's fingers tightened on the dagger. She could still do this. He was sitting. She was standing. One quick thrust, and years of planning would culminate in his death. Her father would be avenged. The monster who ruled the vampire territories of the eastern seaboard would finally pay for his crimes. She lunged. Lazarus moved like smoke. One moment he was seated, the next he stood behind her, his hand wrapped around her wrist with enough pressure to make her gasp, but not enough to break bone. The dagger clattered to the floor. His other hand came to rest against her throat, not squeezing, just present, a reminder of how easily he could end her. "Your father," he murmured against her ear, his breath cool on her skin. "Attacked my brother Demetrius during a peace negotiation. Thomas Mallory came to a meeting meant to establish protection for human villages, and he tried to assassinate a vampire prince in front of witnesses from both our kinds. Demetrius defended himself. Your father died because he chose violence over diplomacy." "Liar!" Sera twisted in his grip, but it was like fighting stone. "My father was a good man. He was protecting people from monsters like you. Your father was a zealot who couldn't accept that humans and vampires had learned to coexist." Lazarus's voice remained maddeningly calm. "I have the documents from that meeting. I have testimony from the 3 human representatives who witnessed what happened. I even have your father's own journal, which we recovered from his body. He wrote about his plan to kill Demetrius, to start a war that would purge the vampire scourge. Does that sound like protection to you?" Sera couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything she knew, everything she had been told by her mother, by her father's old hunting companions, was being torn apart by this creature's words. "You're lying," she repeated, but her voice cracked. "I could kill you right now," Lazarus said, almost conversationally. "You broke into my home with intent to murder. By both human and vampire law, I would be justified in draining you dry and leaving your body for the sunrise." His grip loosened slightly. "But I'm curious. You spent 3 weeks here, watching, waiting. In that time, did you see us hurt anyone? Steal from the village? Take blood without consent?" She had. She'd watched, and she'd seen nothing like what she expected. The vampire household employed dozens of humans who seemed happy, even cheerful. She'd witnessed voluntary blood donations, humans lining up at the medical wing for what looked like a routine blood drive, leaving with payment and refreshments. She'd seen Lazarus himself settle a dispute between two farmers with wisdom and fairness that shocked her. But it had to be a trick. Had to be. Deception, she whispered. It's all deception. Then you're either a fool or willfully blind. Lazarus released her suddenly, stepping back. Sera stumbled forward, caught herself on the desk. When she turned, he was holding out her dagger, hilt first. Take it. Try again if you truly believe I'm a monster. But this time, look me in the eyes when you do it, and tell me you're certain you're killing something evil. Sera stared at the offered weapon. This had to be another trick. No one gave their would-be assassin a second chance. Her hand reached out automatically, fingers closing around the familiar leather grip. She raised it, point aimed at his heart, and met those crimson eyes. They weren't cold, they weren't empty. They held centuries of weariness, yes, but also something that looked almost like hope, like he wanted her to see the truth, wanted her to understand. A monster wouldn't look at her that way. A monster wouldn't care. The dagger fell from her nerveless fingers for the second time. "What did you do to me?" she demanded, hating how her voice shook. "Nothing." Lazarus bent and retrieved the blade, setting it on his desk. "I'm simply letting you see what you refused to see before. Your grief and rage made you blind, Sera Mallory. They made you easy to manipulate." "The hunters," they said. "The hunters want war," Lazarus interrupted, his voice hardening. "Not all of them, but enough. There are factions on both sides who profit from conflict. Fear keeps people dependent on protection, and protection can be sold at a high price. Your father's old friends likely saw a grieving daughter as the perfect weapon. Wind her up, point her at me, and wait for the chaos." Sera's legs gave out. She sank into the chair Lazarus had vacated, her mind reeling. Could it be true? Had she been used? She thought of Marcus, her father's closest friend, who had trained her, fed her stories of vampire atrocities, helped her plan this infiltration. Marcus, who had significant investments in weapons manufacturing. Marcus, who stood to gain enormously if the fragile peace between humans and vampires shattered. "Oh God," she breathed. "I'm not asking you to trust me," Lazarus said, moving to a cabinet and pouring something amber into 2 glasses. He offered her one. "I'm asking you to think, to question, to look at the evidence with clear eyes." He settled against the edge of his desk, drinking from his own glass. "Stay here, not as a prisoner, but as my guest. See how we truly live. Read the documents. Talk to the humans who work here, who live in the territories under my protection. Then make your choice. And if I still choose to kill you?" Sera took the offered drink, more because her hands needed something to do than out of any desire to consume it. "Then you'll do it with full knowledge of what you're destroying, and I'll respect that more than blind vengeance." His lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Though I'll still defend myself, and you should know I'm significantly harder to kill than my brother was. Your father at least had the element of surprise." The liquor burned going down, grounding her in the physical sensation. Sera studied the vampire king over the rim of her glass. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things often were, all sharp edges and lethal grace. But there was something else too, something in the way he looked at her, like she mattered beyond being a threat to eliminate. "Why do you care if I understand?" she asked. "Why not just kill me and be done with it?" Lazarus was quiet for a long moment. "Because I'm tired," he finally said. "Tired of the cycle. Tired of violence breeding more violence. Your father's death created you. His would be avenger. Your death would create someone else, another hunter with another grievance. It has to stop somewhere." He set down his glass. "Let it stop here. Let it stop with us choosing something different." "Us." The word hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. "I don't even know what that would look like," Sera admitted. "Neither do I." This time his expression was definitely a smile, small and slightly uncertain, remarkably human for a creature centuries old. "But I'm willing to find out if you are." Sera should have said no, should have grabbed her dagger and run from this place, from this vampire whose words were dismantling everything she'd built her life around. But she was so tired too, tired of hating, tired of planning death, tired of the hollow ache where her father used to be. "1 week," she heard herself say. "I'll stay 1 week. But I want full access to those documents you mentioned, and I want to talk to people without you hovering over me." "Agreed," Lazarus extended his hand. 1 week. No deception, no manipulation, just truth. His hand was cool when she shook it, but not corpse cold like the stories claimed. His grip was firm, respectful. When she met his eyes again, that strange hope had grown stronger. What had she just agreed to? The morning sun filtered through heavy curtains in the room Lazarus had given her. It was nothing like the servants' quarters where she'd been sleeping for the past 3 weeks. This was a guest suite with a 4-poster bed, antique furniture, and a bathroom that would have cost more than her childhood home. Sera stood at the window, watching the household wake below. The Vampire Manor sat on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling estate that blended old-world architecture with modern security. In daylight, she could see the full scope of it: gardens, outbuildings, the medical wing where blood donations happened, even what looked like a small school. A knock at her door made her turn. "Come in." A young woman entered carrying a breakfast tray. She had warm brown skin and bright eyes, and she moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in her surroundings. "Good morning, I'm Hannah. King Lazarus said you'd be staying as a guest and might have questions." Sera studied her carefully. "You work here?" "I teach at the school." Hannah set the tray on a small table. "History and literature. 23 students right now, ages 6 to 16. All human, all from the surrounding villages. A vampire king runs a school for human children." 3 schools, actually. This is just the closest one." Hannah poured tea with practiced ease. "The treaty territories have better education systems than most human-only regions. Better health care, too. Vampires live a long time, so they think in terms of generations. Investing in children makes sense to them." This wasn't what Sera had expected. She'd imagined having to pry information from frightened servants, not having it offered freely. "You're not afraid of them?" Hannah considered the question seriously. "I'm careful around them, respectful. But afraid? No, I've worked here for 5 years. In that time, I've seen King Lazarus negotiate water rights for 3 villages, fund medical research that saved my nephew's life, and personally stop a rogue vampire who was attacking travelers." She met Sera's eyes. "I know what you probably think. I know the stories that get told, but I also know what I've lived." "The blood donations," Sera said. "Are they really voluntary?" "Completely. I donate once a month. They pay well, screen for health issues, and never take more than is safe. It's basically like donating plasma, except the compensation is better and they're far more careful about our well-being." Hannah smiled slightly. "Healthy humans with good blood are valuable. It would be stupid to damage their source." That's a cold way to put it. Maybe, but it's also honest. The treaty works because both sides benefit. Vampires get reliable access to blood without hunting. Humans get protection and resources. Perfect? No, but better than the alternative. Sera sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted despite having just woken. "I came here to kill him." "I know." Hannah's expression didn't change. "You're not the first. There was a hunter 2 years ago, another one 4 years before that. King Lazarus doesn't kill them unless he has no choice. He shows them what we've built here, lets them see the truth, and sends them home." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Hannah moved toward the door. "Read the documents he's offered you, talk to people, then make your own choice, but make it based on reality, not stories." She paused at the threshold. "Breakfast is getting cold. The eggs are particularly good today." After Hannah left, Sera picked at the food without tasting it. Her mind was spinning too fast for appetite. Everything she'd been told, everything she'd believed was being challenged, and she didn't know what to trust anymore. A leather portfolio sat on the desk, documents she hadn't noticed being delivered. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside were meeting minutes from the peace negotiation where her father died. Multiple signatures, both human and vampire. Proposed terms for protecting villages, trade agreements, safety protocols, and then, halfway through, a note in handwriting she recognized. Her father's angular script detailed his plan to strike the beast when his guard was down and ignite the righteous war. Sera's vision blurred. She forced herself to keep reading. Witness statements from the 3 human representatives all told the same story. Thomas Mallory had waited until Demetrius Corvain stood to propose a toast to peace, then drew a blessed silver blade and attacked. The vampire prince had defended himself. The fight was brief and brutal, and Thomas had died, still swinging. There was more. Photographs of villages under vampire protection, thriving and safe. Crime statistics showing dramatic drops in violence. Medical records of humans treated in vampire facilities, receiving care they couldn't have afforded elsewhere. Financial documents proving the treaty territories had lower poverty rates, better infrastructure, longer life expectancies than comparable human-only regions. The evidence was overwhelming, and it painted her father not as a hero, but as a fanatic who had nearly destroyed something precious. Sera closed the portfolio and put her head in her hands. She wanted to scream, to cry, to rage at someone. But who? Her father, for lying to himself and her? Marcus and the other hunters for using her grief? Herself for not questioning sooner? The soft knock that came an hour later was almost welcome, a distraction from her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, not bothering to hide that she'd been crying. Lazarus entered slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. He'd changed from last night's casual clothes into something more formal, a dark suit that made him look every inch the king he was, but his expression was gentle. "You rid them," he said. It wasn't a question. "All of them." Sera's voice was raw. "My father, he really did start it." "Yes." Lazarus sat in the chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I am. Thomas Mallory's death was a waste. He could have been part of building something better instead." "Why did you keep his journal? Why not destroy it?" "Because truth matters," Lazarus said simply. "Even painful truth, especially painful truth. I won't build peace on lies." Sera laughed bitterly. "Peace, is that what this is? Because it feels like my entire life just got ripped apart." "Sometimes things have to fall apart before they can be rebuilt into something stronger." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know what I'm asking of you is enormous. I'm asking you to question everything you were raised to believe. But you're stronger than you know, Sera Mallory. You infiltrated my household, evaded detection for 3 weeks, and got close enough to strike. That takes intelligence, courage, and remarkable skill." "I failed." "You survived. There's a difference." His crimson eyes held hers. "The question now is what you do with that survival. You can cling to the old beliefs, the old hate, and let it consume you. Or you can choose something new, something harder, but infinitely more valuable." "And what's that?" "Understanding, growth, the possibility of something better than vengeance." He stood, moving to the window. Morning light crept across the floor, stopping just short of where he stood. "I've lived for 347 years, Sera. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've watched humanity grow from candlelight to electricity, from horses to cars that drive themselves. And the one constant through all of it is that hate destroys everything it touches. Always, without exception." "Love isn't much better," Sera said quietly. "It just destroys you differently." Lazarus turned to look at her, something sharp and assessing in his gaze. "You speak from experience. My mother loved my father so much she couldn't see his flaws. After he died, that love curdled into hate for the vampires who killed him, and that hate ate her alive. She died 5 years ago, still cursing your kind with her last breath." Sera stood, needing to move. "So forgive me if I'm skeptical about emotions as a foundation for anything lasting." "Your mother's love was real," Lazarus said. "Her grief was real. But she aimed both at the wrong targets and it poisoned her. That doesn't mean the emotions themselves were the problem." He moved closer, still maintaining that careful distance. "Real love, healthy love, doesn't blind you to flaws. It gives you the strength to see them and choose to stay anyway. Real love doesn't curdle into hate when tested. It bends, it adapts, but it endures." "You sound like you've experienced it." "Once, a long time ago." His expression went distant. "She was human. She knew what I was and loved me anyway. We had 37 years together before age took her. I watched her grow old while I stayed frozen. I held her hand as she died, and it was the most beautiful, terrible thing I've ever experienced." He focused on Sera again. "But I wouldn't trade those years for anything, not for all the centuries I've lived before or since." The raw honesty in his voice made Sera's chest ache. She'd spent so long thinking of vampires as monsters. It was jarring to see such human emotion in those ancient eyes. "What was her name?" she asked softly. "Eleanor. She was a teacher, like Hannah. She believed in education as liberation, in knowledge as power." A small smile touched his lips. "She would have liked you, I think. She always admired people with fire in them." "Even when they wanted to kill you?" "Especially then." His smile grew. "Eleanor tried to stake me when we first met. She thought I'd killed her brother. I proved his death was caused by a rogue vampire I'd already executed, and she joined me in reforming the blood laws to prevent it from happening again. We became partners, then friends, then more." Sera tried to imagine it. A human woman brave enough to love a vampire king, secure enough in herself to age beside someone immortal. It seemed impossible, and yet Lazarus spoke of Eleanor with such tenderness that Sera couldn't doubt the relationship had been real. "I can't be her," Sera said abruptly. "I can't be whoever you're hoping to find again." "I'm not asking you to be." Lazarus's voice was firm. "Eleanor was Eleanor. You are you. I'm not looking for a replacement, Sera. I'm simply trying to prevent another senseless death and maybe, in the process, help you find a truth worth living for instead of dying for." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Sera wanted to argue, to push back against the unexpected pull she felt toward this creature who should have been her enemy. But she was too tired for more fighting, at least for now. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think. Time to figure out what I believe when I'm not being told what to believe. You have it. The week I promised, or longer if you need." Lazarus moved toward the door. "I have meetings today, but you have full run of the estate. Talk to anyone, go anywhere. The only restriction is the lower levels during daylight hours, and that's for practical reasons rather than secrecy. That's where those of us who are light-sensitive rest." "You don't burn in the sun?" "Not immediately. But it's uncomfortable and weakening, like a human spending hours in extreme heat. We can endure it if we must, but we prefer not to." He paused at the door. "There's a library on the second floor, East Wing. It has books on treaty law, vampire history, and Eleanor's personal journals if you're interested. She wrote extensively about her experiences." Then he was gone, leaving Sera alone with her turbulent thoughts and a decision that suddenly felt far more complicated than killing or being killed. The library was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of volumes, some so old their spines had faded to illegibility. Sera found Eleanor's journals exactly where Lazarus said they'd be, a collection of leather-bound books arranged chronologically on a special shelf. She opened the first one, dated 1698, and began to read. The handwriting was elegant but practical, the words of someone who wrote for clarity rather than artistry. Eleanor detailed her first encounter with Lazarus, how she'd infiltrated a vampire gathering intent on revenge, how he'd disarmed her both literally and figuratively. The parallels to Sera's own situation were unsettling, but as she read on, the entries became less about vampires and more about building something new. Eleanor wrote about the first treaty negotiations, the resistance from both sides, the small victories and crushing setbacks. She wrote about falling in love despite knowing it was complicated, dangerous, and finite. "I asked Lazarus today why he wants peace with humans, when war would be so much simpler," one entry read. "He said that simple and right are rarely the same thing. He said he's lived long enough to know that violence is a spiral, each death creating the justification for the next. He said he wants to build something that will outlast him, something that will matter centuries from now. I think I'm falling in love with a dreamer wearing a monster's face." Sera's throat tightened. She turned pages, watching Eleanor's relationship with Lazarus deepen, alongside her work reforming blood laws and establishing protections for both species. There was such hope in these pages, such determination to make the world better. The later entries grew more bittersweet, grew more. Eleanor wrote about aging, about silver creeping into her hair while Lazarus remained unchanged. She wrote about their decision not to turn her, not to make her vampire. "I want to live fully human," she'd written. "I want my natural span, whatever that may be. And I want Lazarus to remember that humans are precious because we're brief, not in spite of it." The final entry was dated 1735. "I'm dying." We both know it, though Lazarus pretends we have more time. My body is failing in the way all bodies eventually do. I'm not afraid. I've lived more fully in these 37 years than most people do in twice the time. I've loved and been loved by someone extraordinary. I've helped build a peace that will outlast me. That's enough. That's more than enough. My only regret is leaving him alone again. He says he'll be fine, but I know him better. He'll grieve. He'll throw himself into work. He'll carry on because that's what he does. But I hope someday he finds someone else. Not a replacement for me, but someone new to remind him why this all matters. Someone to fight for, to dream with, to love. He deserves that. Even monsters deserve love, and he's the best monster I've ever known. Sera closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. She cried for Eleanor, dead nearly 3 centuries. She cried for Lazarus, who had loved and lost. She cried for her father and mother, consumed by hate that never had to exist. And she cried for herself, for the revenge that had defined her for so long and now lay in ruins. She had beautiful handwriting, didn't she? Sera jumped. She hadn't heard anyone approach. An older vampire stood nearby, white hair braided elaborately, eyes the color of amber rather than blood. She wore modern clothes, but carried herself with the bearing of ancient nobility. "I'm sorry," Sera said, wiping her eyes. "I didn't mean to intrude." "These journals were left here to be read," the vampire said gently. Eleanor wanted her story known. "I'm Viviana, one of Lazarus's advisors. I knew Eleanor, actually. She was quite remarkable." "You knew her?" "For all 37 years she spent with Lazarus. I was skeptical at first, I'll admit. Humans seemed so fragile, so brief. I didn't understand what he saw in her." Viviana smiled, the expression transforming her austere features. "But Eleanor had a way of making you believe impossible things were possible. She convinced our kind that peace was practical, not just idealistic. She showed us that protecting humans meant ensuring our own survival, because without willing blood donors, we'd be forced back to hunting. And hunting meant war." "She changed everything," Sera said slowly. "She did. And then she died, as humans do. And Lazarus has spent nearly 300 years maintaining what they built together. Some of us thought he'd give up after she was gone, that grief would make him abandon the dream. But he held firm. He's held firm through wars, plagues, revolutions, and endless challenges from both sides." Viviana's amber eyes studied Sera with uncomfortable intensity. "You're the first person in a very long time to make him hope again." "I tried to kill him," Sera protested. "Yes, just like Eleanor did. Apparently he has a type." Viviana's tone was dry. "But I'm not here to push you toward anything. I'm here to tell you that if you do choose to stay, to build something with him, it won't be easy. Both our peoples will resist. Humans will call you a traitor. Vampires will call you a distraction. You'll face opposition that Eleanor never did, because the peace is older now, more established, and both sides have factions that profit from tension." "Then why would I do it?" Sera asked. "Because it matters, because you have the chance to be part of something larger than yourself, larger than revenge or hate or fear, because Lazarus is a good man, despite what he is, and he deserves someone who sees that." Viviana moved toward the door. "Or you can leave. Go back to your old life, your old beliefs. No one will stop you. The choice is yours, Sera Mallory, but choose with full knowledge of what you're choosing." Alone again, Sera stared at Eleanor's journals. The choice seemed impossible, a chasm too wide to cross. But then, Eleanor had probably felt the same way once, and she'd crossed it anyway. The week passed in a blur of revelations. Sera talked to dozens of humans who lived and worked in the vampire territories. She visited villages under Lazarus's protection, saw the schools and hospitals and infrastructure that treaty money provided. She read treaty law until her eyes burned, understanding the careful balance of rights and responsibilities. She also spent time with Lazarus, though neither of them spoke about what was happening between them. He showed her the medical wing where blood donations were processed with the same care as any human facility. He introduced her to other vampires, some friendly, some merely polite, all clearly devoted to their king. He took her to the vault where weapons from attempted assassinations were stored, a sobering reminder that she wasn't the first and wouldn't be the last to try. "Why keep them?" she asked, looking at the collection of stakes, blessed blades, and even a few modern weapons. "To remember that peace is fragile," Lazarus said quietly. "To never become complacent. Every weapon here represents a failure on my part, someone I didn't reach in time, someone who died believing lies. You can't save everyone." "No, but I can try." He picked up a silver dagger, similar to the one Sera had carried. This belonged to a young man named Jacob. His sister was killed by a rogue vampire, and he blamed me for not preventing it. He was right to blame me. I should have caught that rogue sooner. Jacob died trying to drive this into my heart, and I hold myself responsible. Sera watched him handle the blade with such careful sorrow. "What happened to the rogue?" "I executed him personally. It didn't bring Jacob back. It didn't ease his sister's family's grief, but it ensured that vampire would never kill again." Lazarus replaced the dagger. "Justice is cold comfort, but it's all we can sometimes offer." They climbed the stairs back to the main levels in silence. It was late evening, the time when the household shifted from day to night, humans retiring and vampires emerging. Sera had grown accustomed to the rhythm, found it almost comforting. "Your week is almost up," Lazarus said as they reached the main hall. "Tomorrow would make 8 days since you arrived." "I know." Sera had been counting too, dreading and anticipating this moment in equal measure. "Have you decided what you want to do?" She turned to face him. In the dim light, he looked more human somehow, or perhaps she'd simply stopped seeing him as a monster. His white hair was tied back tonight, revealing the elegant lines of his face. His crimson eyes held that familiar hope, tempered now with resignation, as if he expected her to leave. "I want to stay," Sera said, and watched shock ripple across his features. "Not forever. I don't know about forever. But I want to stay longer. I want to understand more. I want to—" She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the pull she felt. "You want to see if this thing between us is real," Lazarus finished softly, "or if it's just proximity and circumstance." "Is there something between us?" Sera's heart hammered. "Or am I imagining it?" "You're not imagining it." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker red in his irises. "I've been trying not to influence you, not to let my own feelings complicate your choice. But since you're staying, I should be honest. Yes, Sera, there's something between us. I don't know what it is yet, but it's real." "This is insane," Sera breathed. "A week ago I wanted to kill you. A week ago you thought I was a monster who murdered your father." Lazarus raised one hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was cool but gentle. "Now you know the truth. Now you're choosing with clear eyes. That makes all the difference." Sera leaned into his touch before she could think better of it. "I'm still angry. At my father, at Marcus, at the situation. I don't know how to let that go." "You don't have to let it go all at once. Healing isn't linear." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But maybe we can figure it out together, if you want to." "I want to," Sera admitted. "I'm terrified, but I want to." "Good." Lazarus smiled, genuinely smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Because I'm terrified too, and it's easier to be scared with company." She laughed despite everything. "The Vampire King, terrified? Of course. The things worth having are always terrifying. You think Eleanor didn't scare me senseless? The possibility of love, of connection, of losing someone again. It's all terrifying, but it's also worth it." Sera closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. It was impulsive, probably stupid, definitely complicated, but his lips were soft against hers, his hand cupping her face with such tenderness that her fear melted away. This was real. This mattered. Whatever came next, this moment was true. When they broke apart, both breathing hard though only one of them needed air, Lazarus pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as a guest, not as someone still deciding. Stay because you want to, because you're choosing this, choosing us." "Yes," Sera said. "Yes, I'm staying." The news of Sera's decision spread through the vampire household like wildfire. Most reactions were cautiously positive. The staff had grown fond of her during her week of questions and observation, but not everyone was pleased. Marcus arrived 3 days later, flanked by 2 other hunters. Sera saw them from a window, their black vehicles kicking up dust on the long drive to the manor. Her stomach clenched. "I should talk to them," she told Lazarus. They were in his study, reviewing security reports. The domestic scene would have seemed impossible a week ago. Not alone. Lazarus's tone left no room for argument. Marcus is dangerous, and he's not here for a friendly conversation. He's here for me. I can handle it. Then handle it with backup. Lazarus stood, already moving toward the door. Humor me, Sera. You matter to me, which means your safety matters to me. Let me stand with you. The words warmed her even as the situation chilled her. Fine, but let me do the talking. They met Marcus and his companions in the formal receiving room. It was a calculated choice. The room was designed to impress and intimidate, with its soaring ceilings and portraits of vampire nobility through the ages. Marcus looked out of place in his combat gear, a soldier in a throne room. Sera. Marcus's voice was harder than she remembered. We've come to bring you home. I am home, Sera said quietly. Marcus's face darkened. That thing has manipulated you, twisted your thinking. We're here to help you remember who you are. I know exactly who I am. Sera stepped forward, keeping herself between Marcus and Lazarus. I'm Thomas Mallory's daughter, yes, but I'm also someone who was lied to, used as a weapon, and nearly died for a cause built on deception. You used me, Marcus. You used my grief. I taught you the truth. You taught me hate. Sera's voice cracked like a whip. You fed me half-truths and outright lies. My father started the fight that killed him. He was the aggressor, and you knew it. You had to know it. Marcus's expression flickered, guilt flashing before being buried under righteous anger. Your father was a hero. He died fighting monsters. He died attacking diplomats at a peace meeting, Lazarus said, his voice dangerously soft. And you've spent 15 years profiting from that death, using it to recruit more hunters, sell more weapons, perpetuate more violence. You don't get to speak, Marcus snarled. You don't get to tell us who we are. But I do. Sera moved fully in front of Lazarus now, claiming her position. I get to decide what I believe. I get to choose where I stand. And I'm standing here with people who have shown me more honesty in a week than you did in years. One of Marcus's companions reached for a weapon. Instantly the room filled with tension. Lazarus moved with that impossible vampire speed, positioning himself to intercept. But Sera raised her hand, stopping him. Don't, she said. They're leaving, right now, before this becomes something that can't be taken back. We're not leaving without you, Marcus insisted. Then you're not leaving. Lazarus's voice was ice. Because she's staying voluntarily, and if you try to take her by force, you'll start a war you cannot win. Is that what you want, Marcus? War? More death? Or do you want to accept that Sera Mallory is an adult capable of making her own choices? The standoff lasted an eternity. Marcus's hand hovered near his weapon. Sera held her breath. One wrong move, one instant of violence, and everything would shatter. Finally, Marcus stepped back. You're making a mistake, he said to Sera. When you realize it, don't come crying to us. I won't, Sera promised. But Marcus, if you try to send someone else after Lazarus, if you try to undermine the treaty, I'll stop you myself. I know your operation, your contacts, your plans. I'll expose everything. Marcus's face went white with rage, but he turned and left, his companions following. Sera watched until their vehicles disappeared down the drive, then her knees gave out. Lazarus caught her before she hit the floor. I have you, he murmured. You're safe. You're safe. I just burned my last bridge, Sera gasped, the reality hitting her. No, you built a new one. Lazarus helped her to a chair, kneeling in front of her so they were eye level. What you just did took extraordinary courage. You chose truth over comfort, growth over stagnation. I'm in awe of you. I'm terrified, Sera admitted. I know, but you're not alone in it. Not anymore. He took her hands in his. Whatever comes next, we face it together. I promise you that. Sera believed him. Against all logic, against everything she'd been taught, she believed him absolutely. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of learning each other. Lazarus taught Sera about vampire society, introducing her to the complex web of alliances and rivalries that governed their world. She met other vampire nobles, some welcoming, others openly skeptical of a human in their king's life. They'll come around, Lazarus assured her after a particularly frosty meeting with the vampire duchess. Or they won't, and we'll manage anyway. You make it sound simple. It is simple, difficult, but simple. He pulled her close in the privacy of his chambers, where they'd grown comfortable being alone together. I love you, Sera. That's the simple part. Everything else is just logistics. Sera's breath caught. They hadn't said those words yet, though the feeling had been building between them for weeks. You love me? Desperately, completely, in a way that terrifies and exhilarates me. Lazarus cupped her face. I love your fire, your courage, your refusal to accept easy answers. I love how you challenge me, how you make me want to be better. I love you, Sera Mallory, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. I love you too, Sera whispered, the words feeling both foreign and perfect. I don't know when it happened, but it did. I love you. The kiss that followed was different from their previous ones, deeper and more certain, a claiming and a promise. When Lazarus lifted her, carrying her to his bed, Sera went willingly. She'd chosen this, chosen him, and she'd never been more sure of anything. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate by turns, Lazarus worshipping her body with a reverence that made her feel precious beyond measure. He was careful with his strength, mindful of his nature, but Sera didn't want careful. She wanted real, raw, honest. She pushed him to let go, to trust her with all of himself, and when he finally did, when he let his control slip and showed her the full intensity of what he felt, it was transcendent. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Sera's head on Lazarus's chest, listening to his unnecessary heartbeat. He stroked her hair with infinite gentleness. I want forever with you, he said quietly. I know that's asking the impossible. I know you'll age and I won't. But I want every day you'll give me, every moment. I want to build a life with you, however long it lasts. Sera had been thinking about this, about the fundamental inequality of loving someone immortal. What if I don't want to age? What if I want to turn? Lazarus went very still. You can't mean that. Why not? If we're building something together, why should it have an expiration date? Sera propped herself up to look at him. Eleanor chose to stay human. I respect that, but it's not the choice I have to make. Sera, becoming vampire is irrevocable. You'd give up the sun, give up aging, give up being human. You'd outlive everyone you know. The weight of centuries, the loneliness, the constant vigilance, it's not a gift, it's a burden. Then we'll carry it together. Sera stroked his face. I'm not saying now, I'm not saying tomorrow, but someday when I'm ready. I want that option. I want forever with you too, Lazarus. Real forever, not just a human lifetime. His eyes shimmered with emotion. You would do that? Give up everything you are? I'm not giving it up, I'm transforming it. There's a difference. Sera kissed him softly. But only if you want that too. Only if you're willing to share eternity with me. Willing? Lazarus laughed, the sound choked. Sera, I've been alive for over 3 centuries, and the idea of spending the rest of them with you is the best thing I've ever imagined. But I need you to be sure. Absolutely certain. This isn't a decision to make lightly. I know. That's why I'm not asking for it now. I'm just saying it's what I want eventually. Sera settled back against his chest. We have time. Let's use it to be sure. They had months. Months of learning each other's rhythms, of navigating the complexities of a human-vampire relationship in the public eye. Sera became a fixture at Lazarus's side, attending treaty meetings and diplomatic functions. She studied vampire law, trained in self-defense with Viviana, and slowly built her own place in this world. The human communities had mixed reactions. Some saw her as a traitor, others as a bridge. Sera did her best to ignore both labels and simply be herself, honest and open about her experiences. She also reconnected with her mother's sister, Aunt Claire, who had stayed distant during Sera's hunting years. Claire was cautiously supportive when Sera explained everything. Your mother would have hated this, Claire said over tea in a small cafe. But your mother was eaten alive by her hate. I think she'd rather you be happy than right if she could see clearly enough to choose. Do you think I'm making a mistake? Sera asked. Claire considered carefully. I think you're making an unconventional choice, but I've met Lazarus now. I've seen how he looks at you, how he listens when you speak, how he yields to your judgment even when he doesn't have to. That's not a monster, Sera. That's a man in love, vampire or not. The validation meant more than Sera expected. She left the meeting feeling lighter, more certain. 6 months after moving into the vampire manor, Sera woke to find Lazarus watching her sleep, a habit he'd developed that she found endearing rather than creepy. What? she mumbled, still half asleep. I want to show you something. He was already dressed, excitement visible in his normally composed features. Get ready. We're taking a trip. The trip turned out to be a journey to a property Lazarus owned in the mountains, a smaller estate surrounded by forest. It was beautiful, isolated, and utterly peaceful. I had this built for Eleanor, Lazarus explained as they walked through the empty halls. Somewhere she could escape the politics and pressure. She loved it here. It's perfect. Sera could imagine Eleanor here, reading in the sunlight, writing her journals. I want to give it to you, Lazarus said. Not as a replacement for Eleanor, not as a shrine to the past, but as a place that's yours, where we can build new memories, somewhere you can always escape to, always feel safe. Sera's eyes burned with tears. You're giving me a house? I'm giving you a home, our home if you want it. Lazarus took her hands. I know the manor is full of history and politics. I thought maybe here could be different, private, ours. Yes, Sera breathed. Yes, I want that. They spent 3 days at the mountain estate, just the two of them, no servants or guards or responsibilities. They made love in every room, christening the space with their presence. They talked about the future, about plans for expanding the treaty territories, about Sera's desire to eventually turn and what that would mean. On the last night, sitting on the porch watching stars emerge, Lazarus gave Sera a ring. It was ancient, a band of silver and platinum set with a blood-red ruby. This was Eleanor's, he said softly. She left it for me to give to whoever came next, if anyone ever did. She wanted it to represent continuity, the idea that love doesn't end, it just transforms and grows. Sera slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. I wish I could have known her. She would have loved you, probably would have recruited you for a dozen reform projects. Lazarus smiled. She was relentless that way. I want to be like that. Relentless for good things, not destruction. Sera leaned against him. Will you help me? Will you teach me how to build instead of tear down? Every day, Lazarus promised, for as long as you want me. Forever then. Sera turned his face to hers. I'm ready, Lazarus. I want to turn. I want forever with you, starting now. He searched her eyes. You're certain? Completely certain? Completely. I've thought about it, researched it, talked to other turned humans. I know what I'm choosing. I want this. She kissed him. I want you for all the centuries we can have. Lazarus's control cracked. He pulled her close, holding her like she was infinitely precious. I love you. I'll love you through whatever comes. I promise you that. Then turn me. Make me yours completely. The process was more intimate than Sera expected. They made love first, slowly and tenderly, Lazarus worshiping every inch of her human body one last time. Then, when she was pliant and open in his arms, he bit. The pain was sharp but brief, his venom rushing through her veins like liquid fire. Sera gasped, clinging to him as her body began to transform. Lazarus held her through it, murmuring reassurances, his wrist already open so she could drink when the thirst came. The thirst was overwhelming when it hit. Sera's canines lengthened, her senses sharpening to excruciating clarity. She could hear Lazarus's heartbeat, smell his ancient blood, and she needed it with a desperation that eclipsed everything else. Drink, he urged, pressing his wrist to her lips. Take what you need. The first taste exploded across her tongue, rich and complex and perfect. Sera drank deeply, feeling power flood through her transforming body. She could feel herself changing, cells rewriting, mortality giving way to something vast and enduring. When she finally pulled away, sated and exhausted, Lazarus was smiling. Welcome to eternity, my love. Sera looked at her hands, seeing them pale to translucent white, her veins visible beneath. Her hair, when she caught sight of it in a mirror, had bleached to pure white, falling around her face like snow. Her eyes, she knew without looking, would be red now. Vampire red. I'm beautiful, she breathed, wonder in her voice. You always were. Now you're just eternal. Lazarus kissed her forehead. How do you feel? Powerful, clear, like I can hear and see and feel everything. Sera tested her new strength, lifting a heavy chair with one hand. This is incredible. It is, but it's also dangerous at first. You'll need to learn control, especially around humans. The bloodlust is strong when you're newly turned. Lazarus guided her back to the bed. Rest now. Let your body finish the transformation. I'll be here when you wake. Sera slept, and when she woke, the sun had set and she felt reborn. Lazarus was indeed beside her, watching over her with infinite patience. Ready to learn to be a vampire? He asked. Ready. Sera took his hand, marveling at how their skin matched now, both pale and perfect. Teach me everything. The weeks of learning to control her new nature were challenging but exhilarating. Lazarus taught her to manage the thirst, to move with vampire speed without destroying everything around her, to use her enhanced senses without becoming overwhelmed. Viviana helped her understand the political implications of being a vampire now, the shift in how others would perceive her. Returning to the manor as a vampire rather than a human was strange. The servants who had befriended Sera treated her differently now, with more deference and slight nervousness, but Hannah, the teacher, hugged her anyway. You're still you, Hannah said firmly. Just colder and with better reflexes. Sera laughed, relieved. Thank you, I needed to hear that. Integrating into vampire society as Lazarus's partner was easier now that she was one of them. The nobles, who had been skeptical of a human, accepted her transformation as proof of commitment. Sera threw herself into learning, studying centuries of vampire law and tradition, finding ways to improve and update outdated practices. A year after her transformation, Sera proposed a radical idea at a council meeting: humans and vampires governing together, not in separate spheres, but in genuinely integrated leadership. It would require constitutional changes, she argued, standing before the assembled vampire nobility, but it would also strengthen the treaty beyond anything we've achieved: true partnership, not just coexistence. The room erupted in debate. Some vampires were outraged at the suggestion, others were intrigued. Lazarus, presiding over the meeting, let the discussion flow before finally calling for order. Lady Sera makes a compelling point, he said formally. The treaty has succeeded because both sides benefit. But we've maintained separation in governance, and that creates barriers to deeper integration. I propose we pilot the program in 3 territories, assess the results, and then decide on broader implementation. The motion passed narrowly. Sera tried not to show her excitement, maintaining the regal composure she'd learned, but later in private, Lazarus spun her around in victory. You magnificent creature, he said, grinning. You just changed the foundation of vampire-human relations. We changed it, Sera corrected. I proposed, but you made it possible. We're partners, remember? Partners, Lazarus kissed her deeply. In all things, forever. The pilot program was challenging to implement. Resistance came from both sides, humans who distrusted vampire authority and vampires who saw human involvement as weakness. But Sera and Lazarus worked tirelessly, addressing concerns, building coalitions, proving that integration could work. 2 years into the program, the results were undeniable. The integrated territories showed improved infrastructure, better resource distribution, and significantly reduced tension between species. Other regions began requesting inclusion. Sera stood in the council chamber, now a recognized leader in her own right, and presented the final report. She'd prepared for months, gathering data, testimonials, and projections. The council listened with respect that would have been impossible when she was human. The evidence is clear, she concluded. Integration works. It makes us stronger, safer, and more prosperous. I move that we expand the program to all treaty territories. The vote was overwhelming in favor. Sera caught Lazarus's eye across the chamber and saw his pride, his love, shining clear. That night, they celebrated alone at their mountain estate. The house had become their sanctuary, the place they retreated to when the weight of leadership grew too heavy. You've accomplished more in 3 years as a vampire than many do in centuries, Lazarus said, pouring them both glasses of synthetic blood, the ethical alternative they'd helped develop. I'm so proud of you. I had a good teacher. Sera clinked her glass against his. And a better partner. I couldn't have done any of this without you. We've done well together, Lazarus agreed. Eleanor would have loved seeing this. She dreamed of integration but never imagined it could happen so quickly. Do you think about her often? Sera had grown comfortable with Eleanor's presence in their relationship, the ghost who had paved the way. Sometimes. Less as time passes, but yes, she's part of my history, part of what made me who I am. But you're my present and my future, Sera. You're the dream I get to live. Sera set down her glass and moved to straddle his lap, framing his face with her hands. I love you. I love the life we've built. I love knowing we have eternity to keep building. I love you too. Lazarus pulled her close. My fierce, brilliant, extraordinary love. They made love there by the fireplace, taking their time, savoring each sensation. 3 years of partnership had taught them each other's bodies intimately, every touch calibrated to maximize pleasure. When they finally collapsed together, sated and content, Sera felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. Do you ever regret it? Lazarus asked later, stroking her white hair. Giving up being human, changing your entire life? Never. Sera's answer was immediate and certain. I mourn what my father could have been, what my mother became. But my choices, I regret nothing. You taught me that building is better than destroying, that love is stronger than hate. You gave me purpose beyond revenge. You gave me hope beyond survival, Lazarus countered. You reminded me why this all matters. They fell asleep tangled together, immortal and utterly in love. 5 years after Sera's transformation, the integrated governance model had spread across all treaty territories. Human and vampire councils worked side by side, creating policy that benefited both species. Crime had dropped, prosperity had increased, and the quality of life for all had improved measurably. Sera and Lazarus had become symbols of what was possible, their partnership representing the best of both worlds. They traveled together, speaking at universities and forums, sharing their story and encouraging others to look beyond species to the individuals beneath. One evening, at a gala celebrating the treaty's centennial anniversary, a young human woman approached Sera. She was nervous, hands twisting together. Lady Sera, I wanted to thank you. My name is Sophie. My brother was killed by a rogue vampire 3 years ago, and I wanted revenge. I was planning to do what you tried to do. But then I heard you speak about choosing differently, about how you found truth instead of vengeance. It saved my life. It let me heal instead of becoming another casualty. Sera embraced the young woman, tears prickling her eyes. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you chose life. I'm training to be a mediator now, Sophie continued, to help prevent what happened to my brother from happening to others. You showed me that was possible. After Sophie left, Sera returned to Lazarus's side. He'd watched the exchange from a distance, his expression soft. You've saved more lives by choosing differently than you ever could have by killing me, he said quietly. We've saved them, Sera corrected. Everything we've built together. Lazarus took her hand, Eleanor's ring still gleaming on her finger after 5 years. Dance with me. They moved onto the floor, joining other couples in the elegant waltz. Sera had learned to dance in the years since her transformation, adding it to the list of skills she'd acquired. She loved the way Lazarus led her through the steps, confident and graceful, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. I want to marry you, Lazarus said suddenly. Sera nearly stumbled. What? Marry me. I know we're already bonded in every way that matters, but I want the ceremony. I want to stand before both our peoples and declare my commitment to you. I want you to be my wife, not just my partner. His crimson eyes were intense. Will you marry me, Sera Mallory? Joy flooded through her. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. The wedding was planned for the following spring, a grand affair that would unite vampire tradition with human custom. Sera threw herself into preparations, determined to create something beautiful that honored both aspects of their relationship. Viviana helped her choose a dress, a stunning creation of white silk and silver thread that looked like moonlight given form. You'll be a beautiful bride, the older vampire said with rare warmth. Lazarus is lucky to have found you. I'm the lucky one, Sera insisted. You're both lucky. That's how it should be. The ceremony took place at the mountain estate, under stars and surrounded by forest. Hundreds attended, both vampire and human, nobles and commoners, all there to witness the union. Sera walked down the aisle alone, needing no one to give her away. She gave herself freely and joyfully to the vampire king waiting at the altar. Lazarus looked magnificent in black and silver, his white hair unbound, his expression full of love. The vows they spoke were ones they'd written together, blending vampire and human traditions. Sera promised to stand beside Lazarus through all the centuries to come, to be his partner in leadership and love. Lazarus promised to cherish Sera, to honor her choices, to build a future worthy of her dreams. When they kissed, sealing their union, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers. Sera laughed against Lazarus's lips, deliriously happy. The reception was a celebration unlike any other, dancing and toasts that went until dawn. Lazarus and Sera stayed until the last guest departed, then retreated to their home, finally alone as husband and wife. "How does it feel?" Lazarus asked, carrying Sera over the threshold in the traditional way. "Perfect. Right. Like everything I've done has led to this moment." Sera kissed him. "I love you, husband." "I love you, wife." Lazarus set her down gently. "Ready to start our forever?" "It already started. Years ago when you saw through my disguise and chose to show me truth instead of destroying me. But yes, I'm ready to continue it. Every day, every year, every century." They made love as a married couple for the first time, tender and passionate, claiming and being claimed. When Sera finally fell asleep in Lazarus's arms, she dreamed of the future they would build together. 10 years after Sera's arrival at the Vampire Manor, she and Lazarus stood before the Integrated Council and announced their intention to step back from daily governance. They had trained successors, both vampire and human, who would continue their work. "We've built something that can sustain itself," Sera explained to the assembled leaders. "Our presence isn't necessary for it to thrive. It's time for new voices, new ideas, new leadership." There were protests, but ultimately the transition happened smoothly. Sera and Lazarus remained as advisors, consulted on major decisions, but freed from the constant demands of rule. They used their newfound freedom to travel, visiting vampire communities around the world, learning different approaches to integration. They spent months in Europe, exploring the ancient vampire strongholds. They toured Asia, marveling at how vampire societies there had evolved differently. They even ventured to South America, helping establish new treaty territories. But they always returned to their mountain estate, the home they'd built together. It was there, 20 years after Sera's transformation, that they sat on the porch, watching stars, just as they had the night he'd given her Eleanor's ring. "Any regrets?" Lazarus asked, the question now a comfortable ritual between them. "Not a single one," Sera leaned against him. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. But then you needed to find yourself first, needed to choose this life with open eyes." Lazarus kissed her temple. "We have eternity, my love. That's enough time for everything." "Eternity," Sera echoed, marveling at the word. Once it had seemed impossible, a fantasy. Now it was simply the truth of her existence. She would spend forever with this man, this vampire, this partner who had shown her that love could heal what hate had broken. The mountain wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. In the distance, a wolf howled, the sound lonely and beautiful. Sera closed her eyes, committing the moment to memory, one of thousands she would collect across the centuries. She had slipped into his house disguised as a servant, intent on murder. He had seen through her at once and chosen to save her instead. Everything that came after, the love and the life and the legacy they'd built, flowed from that moment of mercy. Sera Mallory had come for vengeance and found redemption. She had come to take a life, and instead had been given eternity. She had come as an enemy and stayed as a wife, a partner, a queen beside her king. And she had never been happier. The future stretched before them, infinite and full of possibility. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or joys the centuries held, they would face it together. Two souls, one human turned vampire, and one ancient king, bound by love stronger than death, deeper than time. Forever was just beginning, and it was perfect.